In December 2019, Arsenal Football Club wasn't just losing games, they were losing their soul. They were 15th in the Premier League, a leaky ship that had managed exactly one clean sheet in 15 matches. They were the soft team, the punching bag of the Big Six, a factory that created believers who had finally run out of ink. Into this power gig walked a man with 0 days of head coaching experience. Mikel Arteta didn't just inherit a squad, he inherited a blood feud between the players and the fans. The big question was simple: could Pep Printers, a man whose only credential was placing cones for the greatest manager in history, actually survive the furious coast of Highbury? This is a story of a ruthless transformation, a story of non-negotiables, the execution of superstars, and a tactic revolution that turned champagne football into dark arts and monsters. Before you see the defensive brick wall of today, you have to understand the scar Arteta found when he replaced Unai Emery. The Arsenal of 2019 was broken. The dressing room was a collection of fermented bitterness, dominated by aging stars on crimson wages who viewed the club as a luxury retirement home. They were bullied out of matches by teams that simply wanted it more. Arteta's first words weren't about trophies, they were about culture. He demanded a ferocious and hard-working mentality. He spoke of non-negotiables. If you didn't run, you didn't play. If you didn't respect the shot, you were humiliated and discarded. He knew he couldn't play like Manchester City yet. He didn't have the monsters. So he pivoted to a 3-4-3 system, a defensive shell designed to hide the flaws of his centre-backs. It wasn't pretty, but it was ruthless. That season, he managed to reach the semi-finals of the FA Cup to face his master, Pep Guardiola. Arsenal had a 29 possession. In the old days, they would have been humiliated, but Arteta's new compact shape frustrated City. 2 goals from Aubameyang sent them to the final, where they beat Chelsea to lift the trophy. Just 8 months into his job, the myth began. Arteta had silverware. He had bought himself the most dangerous thing in football: time. After the high of the FA Cup, the mud turned cruel. Arsenal didn't just stop winning games, they became the black hole of creativity. For 7 straight league games, the team was a ghost ship. They were 15th in the table, just 4 points above the relegation zone. The media wasn't asking if Arteta would be sacked, they were asking when. December 26, 2020, Chelsea at the Emirates. Arteta's back was against the wall. A loss would likely mean the end. In a move that felt like managerial gambling, he benched the senior stars who had let him down, the uninterested veterans on crimson wages, and threw the keys of the club to the young gunners. That night, the math versus the myth flipped. Arsenal didn't just beat Chelsea 3-1, they dismantled them. Saka's audacious chip over Mendy wasn't just a goal, it was a declaration of independence from the old slow Arsenal. The young gunners didn't just win a game, they saved a career. It was the moment the culture of accountability finally took root. Arteta realized he did need superstars, he needed believers. He spent the rest of the season executing the contract of those who didn't fit, tearing up tales of Mustafi, Socrates and Kolasinac. The season ended in 8th place, a scar on the history books, but the toxic fog had finally lifted. For the first time, their apprentice had a blueprint that belonged entirely to him. If 2021 was about survival, 2022 was a great break. Mikel Arteta and the sporting director, Ido, began the season by doing the unthinkable. They spent 150 million on 6 players, all aged 23 or younger. The media laughed. They called it managerial suicide. But Mikel Arteta wasn't building a squad. He was building a culture of the obsessed. He wanted monsters who could die for his ideas. It was a shocking move. It was the math versus the myth. Arteta bet the entire season that a discipline system was more valuable than individual genius. For months, the gamble worked, driven by furious energy of Martin Odegaard and the stubborn magic of Bukayo Saka. Arsenal climbed to the 8 of the Champions League. It all came down to the blood-feud North London derby and a trip to St James's Park. At Newcastle, The young Gunners finally ran out of ammunition. They weren't just beaten, they were bullied. They were second best in every duel, every second ball, every tackle. That only defeat was a dagger to the heart. The dream of top 4 shattered in cold air. As the players sat in the dressing room, humiliated and silent, the critics sharpened their knives. They said Arteta had bottled it. They said his ruthlessness had left the squad too thin. But as the cameras panned to Arteta, his eyes weren't full of regret, they were full of fermented bitterness. He knew the leaky ship was finally gone. He had found his protagonists. For 248 days, Arsenal didn't just play football. They operated a factory of believers. They topped the table for a record-breaking duration, playing a brand of champagne football. So fluid, it felt like the ghost of 2004 had finally returned. The arrival of Gabriel Jesus and Alexander Zinchenko didn't just add talent, it added champions' DNA. The youngest team in the league was playing with the arrogance of veterans. Arsenal produced the best start in club history, ranking up a staggering 50 points from their first 19 games, a pace that put them in the company of the greatest Premier League sides ever. They weren't just winning games, they were bullying the elite. They dismantled Tottenham home and away, beat Liverpool in a 5-goal thriller at the Emirates, and secured a last-minute win over Manchester United that sent the stadium into a state of pure delirium. Every great tragedy has a signature event where the tension breaks. William Saliba, the Rolls-Royce of defenders at the brick wall of the system, went down with a back injury. In an instant, the mouth of Arteta's high line collapsed. Without Saliba's recovery pace, the defense was exposed as a crime scene. Rob Holding, a loyal servant, was forced into fire. The spectacular football remained, but the defensive resilience vanished. The world watched the trauma of the past returned. 3 consecutive draws against Liverpool, West Ham and Southampton saw a double-digit lead, evaporating a furious cloud of anxiety. The myth was that Arsenal were back. The math was they couldn't keep a clean sheet without their monster at the back. The season ended in a shattered 4-1 execution at the Etihad. Arteta watched his young Gunners get bullied by Erling Haaland and David De Bruyne. He didn't just lose a title, he lost his faith in beauty alone. As he walked off the pitch, heartbroken and furious, he realized the moral of the story. To beat a machine, you can't just be a better team, you have to be a monster. The 2023 collapse was a scar that never healed. It was also the catalyst for the most dangerous version of Arsenal we had ever seen. If the 2023 collapse was a scar, the 2023-2024 season was the armor Arteta built over it. He didn't just want to win anymore, he wanted to suffocate the Premier League. He realized that champagne football was fragile, so he decided to build a garrison. Arteta and Edu went into the market with furious intent. They broke the British transfer record for Declan Rice, a £105 million powerhouse designed to be the heartbeat of the revolution. Rice wasn't just a midfielder, he was a one-man security system, a player who could smell a counter-attack before it even began. Then came the big risk, Kai Havertz. The media called it a crime scene signing, a Chelsea flop with no fixed position. But Arteta saw a tactical monster who could win every area duel and provide the physicality Arsenal had lacked. While the world watched the stars, a secret war was being won on the training grounds under set-piece coach Nicolas Jova. Arsenal transformed into the most feared dead ball team in Europe. Every corner became a psychological torture for the opposition. They crowded goalkeepers, used dark arts to block defenders, and turned the penalty box into a war zone. By the end of the season, they had scored 22 goals from set pieces, a match so dominant it made open play tactics almost secondary. The blood feud with Manchester City reached its climax in March 2024. In the years past, a trip to the Etihad was a humiliation waiting to happen. But this time, Pep's apprentice showed his ruthless evolution. Arteta didn't try to outplay Pep, he tried to nullify him. Arsenal sat in a defensive masterclass, a brick wall so compact that Erling Haaland was reduced to a ghost on the pitch. It wasn't beautiful, but it was monstrous. The 0-0 draw was a declaration of war. It proved that Arsenal were no longer soft, they were the modern monsters of the English football. For Arsenal, the moment was April 14, 2024. Earlier that day, Liverpool had suffered a shock home defeat to Crystal Palace. The door was wide open, the math was simple. Win at home against Aston Villa, and the title was in Arsenal's hands. But standing in their way was the ghost of Arsenal's past, Unai Emery. In the 84th minute, the dagger was plunged. A cross eluded the Arsenal entire defense, allowing Leon Bailey to ghost in at the back post and slot it home. The stadium went silent, a vacuum of hope. 2 minutes later, Ollie Watkins delivered a knockout blow, racing clear on a counter-attack to take the ball over David Raya. That 2-0 defeat wasn't just a loss, it was an execution. It was the only league game Arsenal had lost in the entire 2024 calendar year until that point. But it was the only one that mattered. It handed the initiative back to Manchester City, and as everyone in football knows, when you give Pep Guardiola an inch, he takes the world. Arsenal finished the season with 89 points, a league-high 18 clean sheets. In almost any other era of football, they would have been champions. They fell short by an agonizing 2 points to City. But as Arteta stood on the pitch on the final day, his face wasn't shattered like the year before. It was ferocious. He had moved the club from a leaky ship to the best defense in Europe. By the summer of 2024, Arteta decided that beautiful football had its limits. To win the biggest prizes, he needed to build a team that was impossible to kill. He went back into the market and signed Ricardo Calafiori, a defender with a gladiator's heart, and Mikel Merino, a dual-winning machine. This was the birth of the Iron Curtain. The 2024-2025 season was a story of suffocation. Arsenal's defense had become a historical anomaly, conceding only 34 goals all season, but the math of control backfired in the final third. Arteta's obsession with structure led to a lack of chaos in attack. Arsenal became the stalemate kings, raking up a staggering 14 draws. They didn't lose, falling only 4 times all season, but they couldn't break the lock. The season ended with a 74-point finish and a second-place spot. It was a bitter pill. The defense was a masterpiece, but the attack was a caged bird. The big question was no longer if Arteta was the right man, but how the master had let his apprentice build a machine in this field. However, while they were grinding in England, they were finally exploding on the world stage. For nearly 2 decades, the Champions League had been Arsenal's crime scene, but in 2025, the Monsters finally found their voice in Europe. The signature event of the season happened in the quarterfinals. Arsenal drew the final boss of football, Real Madrid. In the first leg at the Emirates, the Dark Arts were on full display. 2 outrageous free kicks from Declan Rice lit up the Emirates that night. Arsenal didn't just play Madrid that night, they bullied them, but it was a return leg at the Bernabeu that defined the era. In the most hostile stadium on earth, Arsenal stood their ground, winning 2-1. To go on to win the tie 5-1 on aggregate, the world stood in shock. Their apprentices have just dismantled the kings of Europe. For the first time since 2009, Arsenal reached the Champions League semi-finals. They faced PSG in a tactical chess match. The first leg at the Emirates was a masterclass in suffocation. Both teams refused to blink, but PSG snatched a 1-0 lead to take back to France. In the French capital, Arsenal came out like predators. They dominated, but the math of the Champions League is cruel. Despite Arsenal's dominance, after the 2 legs, they fell 3-1 on aggregate. The dream died just one step from the final in Munich, but the moral of the story had shifted. Arsenal were no longer tourists in the Champions League, they were predators. The 24-25 season was a final calibration. Arteta had proven he could build the best defense in the world. He had proven he could execute Real Madrid. He knew exactly what was missing. As he headed into the 2025 summer, he didn't look for more defenders, he looked for finishers. He was ready to turn the ironclad tank into a world destroyer. The 25-26 season is the end game. This is the year Mikel Arteta's progress becomes a powerhouse with dominance. Arsenal no longer challenging, they're the team to beat. The goal is the Premier League trophy, period. With a defense that has become the meanest in Europe and a clinical edge up front, they're aiming to knock Manchester City off their patch for good.